Hey, what's up everyone out there? Thanks so much for tuning into another Addicted Fishing tutorial. Today we're gonna be talking about worm fishing. If you guys missed the first part of this series, we're gonna drop a link down below. We're doing a 3-part series just all in depth about worms. And what are you gonna be covering today?
We're gonna be covering our second style of fishing, and it's with a sliding float setup. So sliding float, fixed weight, drop down to the worm. It's a really good, effective way of fishing for these presentations in variable water conditions. So stay tuned, you guys. It's all coming at you right now.
Right now.
All right, everybody, so to get this kicked off, the first thing we're gonna cover is probably the most important part of this setup. Marlon covered it in the last video, but it's your rod setup. Right here, I have a 9.9, 6 to 12 pound Okuma Guide Select Pro. The 9.9 is the biggest factor in this equation, not so much the brand or whatever it is, but a longer rod is gonna help you fish a sliding float setup or any kind of float setup much more effectively because of the length. Being able to mend that line, keep that line up off the water, and get a natural presentation is gonna be key in all this. So I have the 9.9 rod, a 40 series reel. This is a Kaimar by Okuma as well. And what I have on here for line is a 35 to a 40 pound braided line, high vis. I like the high vis because I tie a bumper on anyways, which I'll show you guys in a second. But that high vis makes it a lot easier to see where your line's going and how it's actually getting pulled by the current. So 30 to 40 pound braided line, it floats very well. What I've come down to here at the very end of my line is I've tied on a fluorocarbon bumper. And what I have here is a blood knot connected to a 20 pound fluorocarbon bumper. That runs all the way down. What I try to do with my bumper here, because I have that sliding float set up, I can fish a lot deeper water, is I try to imagine the deepest hole I'm gonna fish of the day, and that's how long a bumper I'll use. That way I'm not wasting a lot of my fluorocarbon line. So I'll go with this one here. I did 2 arm lengths, which is about 12 feet. What I'm gonna go to now is I'm gonna actually show you guys from start to finish how to set up the entire rig. So I'm gonna reach down here. I'm gonna grab the first things first on this setup. The most important part of this is getting your float to stop. So I'm gonna use these little bobber stops. These are just made by Bomac or wherever P-Line makes them. Everybody makes these little rubber stops. You can find them in the tackle shop, and they have basically just these little rubber stops on this wire with the little bead above that rubber stop. So I'm gonna slide it right through the opening of one of those wires. I'm gonna crimp that line in half just like so, and pull that bead all the way down and that stop all the way up onto my line. And that's what's gonna stop my bobber from floating. And that's what I'm gonna adjust my depth with. So from there, I'm gonna set these down, and I'm gonna go to a 1/2 ounce float here. Today the river's high. You can go with smaller floats, you know, 3/8 and kind of gauge it down, 1/4 ounce if you really need to, if you're just fishing your jig head and maybe a split shot. But I'm gonna use a 1/2 ounce float here. This is just a teardrop shape, clear bobber. Some of my favorite to use for kind of any kind of fishing when you're float fishing. And that's gonna run up to my bobber stop. So that's what's gonna gauge my depth, again, right there. Next thing I'm gonna go to is my little inline sliding weight. There's a few different options when you do this. You can either use these little inline weights like this. This slides up and down your line. They're cheap, they're easy to find. You can use a 3-way swivel and a Dave's Tangle Free or a piece of pencil lead. Anything that's gonna add weight to the midsection of that line is what's gonna be most important here. So I'm gonna slide the line through the midsection of that weight, and that's gonna allow it to slide up and down on my line. So then below that weight, I'm just gonna add my little barrel swivel here. Really, you just want to match it to the size of what your presentation is, how heavy your line test is. You don't want to go with a too big of a barrel swivel because it just catches a lot of the water current. It's just a visual obstruction for those fish. So I'm gonna hold that in, tie a normal fisherman's knot, and she's on there tight. So then I'm gonna go with a 12 pound test. If you're fishing big fish or you're targeting a certain area that you want to have a heavier pound test, high dirty water, you know, a small rapid, if you're stuck on the bank or something, go with a little heavier. You know, I know a lot of guys that'll fish a 20 pound test for this, but what I like is a little bit shorter leader, about 3.5 to 4 feet long is what's proper for me here. And mainly that is because you have 2 areas of weight that are dropping this down into the strike zone. So that 1/2 ounce float, or that 1/2 ounce weight, sinks down into the strike zone, and that worm sits just below it, right in front of those fish's face. And so it's not getting blown around by the current or by the boils or by any of the water conditions you're gonna find in a bigger, deeper hole. I'm gonna add my 12 pound just to the other side of my barrel swivel here. Just like so. About a 3-foot leader. And I'm gonna go to my jig head. And again, like Marlon said in the last one, but I'm gonna bring them up again. These are the Mustad jig heads. They have a really neat little KVD keeper on the backside of that shank and an elongated hook shank itself. And what that does is it puts that further back in those bigger worms that we use so that you're not getting short struck, and that keeper keeps that worm on there the whole time, whether you're getting snagged in a tree, on bottom, in a fish's mouth. It allows you to have a lot more durability out of those worms. And these come in a really cool little variety pack, so you have more colors with you while you're on the river. Today I got one of the blue ones. I love the blue color. It matches the watercolor that we're fishing today. I'm gonna rig this guy up, same thing, normal little knot here. Wet it, pull it tight. And now to add the worm. What I've done here is I had the 6-inch worm, I cut it down to about 4.5, 5 inches, and now I'm gonna add it onto my hook shank here. And the way we do this properly is I like to line up, you see how this has a small line built into the worm of where it came out of the press. I like to keep that right in line with my shank. I'm a perfectionist when it comes out here, and I want that worm and that tail laying flat as it flows through the water current out there and has that natural presentation. So I'm gonna slide that up again to where it almost touches that keeper, just like so. I'm gonna make sure my line is straight alongside my hook here, and I'm gonna just slowly feed it through and push it up onto there, making sure it's got a nice look to it. And there we go. We're set up and we're ready to fish. So the way this looks at the end of it all, you have your bobber stop, you have your bead to keep that float from going past your stop. You got your 1/2 ounce float, 1/2 ounce little inline weight, little barrel swivel, jig head, and your worm, and you're on the river fishing. So now that you guys have seen that, follow us into the river. We're gonna show you the presentation and the effectiveness of how well this thing works. So first thing I'm gonna do when I get to the river and I wanna gauge the depth that I'm gonna be fishing is look out, try to find that edge of where you wanna start your cast. Look where it drops off. Wherever I stop seeing bottom relatively is where I think I can catch a fish. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna gauge out in front of me. It's about 5 to 6 feet deep. So I slide this up, and I'm gonna account for my jig head as my depth in this situation. The key and the beauty of this setup is that you can put it right in those fish's face. Whereas if you have the fixed float or anything like that, you're gonna have to move it up and down, and you're gonna have a lot of water currents varying where that jig head goes. With this, you can get it down fast, you can get it down in the strike zone, and you can keep it there in that window of that strike zone. So I'm set at about 5 feet. I'm gonna go out here, cast it about 45 degrees upriver, let that thing sink down, and you see as you look out towards that float how it's sitting straight up and down. It's not being pulled downriver because it's sticking on the bottom. It's not pointing upriver because my worm is up off the bottom, getting kicked off by a boil. It's sitting straight up and down, and that's how I know my depth is proper. If you see your bobber stop, or if you see your bobber laying facing downriver, you're gonna wanna slide that bobber stop down towards the bobber and shorten up. If you see it sitting upriver, if that yellow end is pointing upriver, you're gonna wanna add depth so that you can get down in that strike zone. That was a good cast, but I'm gonna add just a couple of inches on this one to get a little bit further down in the zone. Try to find bottom and then work your way back up is usually how I like to fish. Keep that line high, make sure to be mending slowly and gently so that you're not pulling that jig head up, and let it float straight down into that tail out, just like so. I'm gonna hero drift this one because it looks too good. All right, everybody, so now that you've seen the in-depth of this setup, Sean's gonna cut to a quick little clip of us putting these floats to work. Everybody, well, we've worked our way down fishing now. Hopefully what you guys have learned from this video today and about this sliding float setup is how effective it can be to keep your presentation in that strike zone in any kind of adverse water conditions, and if you really have to fish short pockets and short windows on the river. So you guys,
I'm just waiting for your float to go down.
I keep looking away, hoping it will.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, don't forget, this is a 3-part series. So Jordan in the next part is going to be talking about drift fishing. So if you want to see that, make sure you tap that subscribe button and turn on that bell. And do not forget, we got some special discount codes for our website to buy worms and jig heads or whatever else you guys want to get in the description below. We appreciate all the support. We'll see you guys on the river.